currently working on a concept called network governance, and it's, I think, a little bit similar to what you talked about, this cooperation between public and private, and then also substituting for services that are not provided by either a hostile state or just a state that is lazy or doesn't want to put money in rural areas or what have you. So I wanted to just double check with you, because it's also a bottom-up approach I'm looking for. You both used the network terminology, but you didn't sort of go into it. So maybe you could spend a couple of seconds, minutes on this.
I was wondering, Stefan, if there is any literary production in Breton, because we tend to think that if a language is protected and encouraged, and then usually you would have also some best examples of it in the use of the language in a literary form. And how is this promoted, if at all? That's my question in the case that you've described. And for Rico, the question is, do you know maybe if there is a similar tendency as regards the Italian language and cantons?
I can confirm that we have literatures in Irish and in Breton. I attend a book fair in Breton in Brittany every year, and it seems to me, as an outsider, to be quite a healthy situation, in spite of a very low level of government support. Now, to get to the question of networks, we're talking about, I suppose, a social phenomenon of, if you like, built around particular schools and other institutions and family-based. As in terms of people actually getting together to provide services, I would say yes, that does exist in the Irish-speaking areas in the Gaeltacht, and significantly, I didn't have time, but I could have added about 2 minutes about the situation in the north of Ireland, which is quite different, where the language does not have any official status, is less well treated than Welsh or Scots Gaelic within the United Kingdom, and where all initiatives have had to come up from bottom, literally nothing from the state forever and ever. So you have people actually building a small housing estate for Irish speakers in the 1960s. That's when it began to get going. The position is in Ireland that we would feel that the government should be doing this, so the reflex is to put pressure on and to campaign and to protest and to complain in order to pressurise the government into doing what it should be, what it declares it's prepared to do. It's an official language. Okay, we'll get on with it and let it be official, but there are a lot of impediments and there's a lot of reluctance in the civil service, if you like, to move towards that. So in terms of the overall population of speakers within Ireland, the map that Stefan, one of the maps that Stefan gave me there, that had the whole country in green with heavy green and light green, all over Ireland now the community of Irish language speakers has stretched out from these traditional areas. So that's what we would also mean by networks, based around, for example, schools or net groups of Irish language family organisations, or around cultural groups, cultural clubs. There would be an element of self-empowerment, particularly in, for example, the foundation of schools. That comes bottom up. The state doesn't say, right, we're going to put an Irish language school in such and such a place. As in Brittany, it comes from demand from below, in terms of their committees are set up in order to achieve this.
In the Breton context, the thing that we don't have, that they have in Ireland, is there isn't one area in Brittany which would be the equivalent of the Gaeltacht. That means that you won't find one place in Brittany, no matter how small, where intergenerational where Breton is spoken by all generations. It just doesn't exist anymore, right? So this is why we have to rely on what I call network here, and most of the time they rely on schools. In one local place, a school is set up, always bottom up, whether they're state schools or Catholic schools or associated schools, they're always bottom up. Then after a while they're regularized by the state, and the parents may ask the local municipality to have signage, for example, in the two languages, or they set up festivals by themselves, and then after a while these festivals would be subsidized. It could be dance or music or even literary festivals as well. So this is what I call networks, because there are places in Brittany that are behind, that haven't, even in Western Brittany, that don't seem to do much about it. But you know, it's a kind of how do you say tâche d'huile in English? You know, it's kind of spreads out. You know, it fills the gaps and very slowly. All right, because at the same time the elderly population is going down. You know, of speakers. So this is why, and of course there's now a measure of media, of social media as well. I wouldn't count too much on that for the moment. The young ones tend to think that this is it, you know, because we have social media, we can be in relation with each other across hundreds of kilometers and all that. Yeah, but that still doesn't make a community as such. So we do need all these, you know, this kind of close-knit network that's being built up. And to answer your question, Ivan, about literature, yeah, there has never been a break in literature in Breton language, even though I must say the Breton-speaking population has been traditionally very little literate in their own language up to the late 19th century. And then, of course, they became literate in French first. The only institution that did bring literacy to the medium of Breton was the Catholic Church up until about the 1940s. Still, there have always been books written and published in Breton. And at the moment, every year, there's more or less about 100, but that's not a lot, of course, but about 100 books of various fiction and, you know, and children's books and everything that are and it goes up. It goes up every year. You know, it used to be 80, it's 90, it's probably 110. And again, we need networks for that, because you won't find Breton books in all the bookshops in Brittany. So this is, again, you know, you have to know where there's a shop, probably maybe 50 kilometers from your home. Well, now of course you can buy them on the internet, but if you want to go to a bookshop and look, you have to rely on a small network of bookshops where you're sure to find. But we do have, yeah, fiction, noir novels, theatre on stage as well, film to a certain extent, because we have a web television with, you know, things that are dubbed from bigger languages like English and French, but also creations. So, you know, for a small network, it's quite active.
Thank you for your question about the Italian, which is a very pertinent question. So you see, Italian is the green one. It's the second smallest minority in Switzerland. But what is a big difference is that you have Italy, a support for Italian churches, Italian nursery schools, Italian courses, what we say, language and culture courses. For example, on Wednesday afternoon, the pupils in Zurich that are Italian, they can go to a school where they teach Italian. So a lot of measures for Italian outside the territory of Italian are supported by Italy, which is not at all the case for Romansh. But nevertheless, you know how it is with minorities. If one gets something, the other says, I want it too. Why do you make it for them and not for us? So now also the Confederation thinks, so Swiss Confederation, about supporting measures for promoting Italian outside its territory. It's also in the same dispatch and culture, you have both themes. But as they state, for Romansh it's much more existential, as we have no retroterra. And for the literature, so I'm a professor for Romansh literature. That means that there is some Romansh literature. So otherwise I wouldn't have a job. So on one hand, we have like a literary tradition of 500 years, which is very well documented and very rich. And also nowadays, for a community of 60,000 speakers, we have quite a literary production, which is supported by the canton and also by the government. We have Romansh publisher who is supported by public funds, and for example also this is typical for Switzerland. If the government gives Swiss literary prizes, they will try to respect also one Romansh book once upon a time. So there is a production, is not 100 books, perhaps it's more 30, 40, but there is literary production.
I think, Tova, that in both cases they're talking about a network community. For network governance, you have to come to Canada, you have to go to Wales. I think that network governance with the support of the state is much more developed and dense in Wales, or the French Basque Country as well, with the support of the Basque autonomous government of the French Basque Country. But in these two cases, it seems it's a network community that happens on the internet, over the phone, voice, like personne à personne, but not necessarily a model of government. The question I had was for Rico. Thank you very much for your presentation. Could you speak about the Lia Romancia? Politically, are they asking for NTA? Are they lobbying either the canton or the confederation to better support the Romansh speakers that are living outside, either in the capital city of Grison or are living outside of the canton together? So politically, do you know what they are, how they mobilize and what they
So
are?
the Lia Romancia is the umbrella organization of the Romansh, founded now 100 years ago, 1919, after First World War. And it should be sort of a lobby organization, and also it should be where the opinion of the Romansh people is collected. They were struggling for territoriality principle and succeeded there. And nowadays calling from the state, from the national government, to have a support for measures they do outside of the canton of Grisons. They will never speak about non-territorial autonomy. You won't find this word in any of the documents, but in fact what they want is that measures are supported in Zurich or in Bern or in other places in Switzerland. What is also a problem is that the supporting of the Lia Romancia by national funds also goes through the canton of Graubünden. So now is the question, can the Confederation support them for measures in Zurich, or should they make another contract, or should they support, because also these actions like nursery schools in Romansh in Zurich, for example, is bottom-up actions, should they support them directly? So this is a bit of a procedural question, but they will never speak of non-territorial autonomy, even if there are some parts of it that seem to me to have a relationship to this concept.
I'll just give a very brief final word to Ireland and Stefan, if you'd like to add anything to.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I won't go too far. Just any time I've come out of Ireland in recent times to any conferences, I've been pestered with questions about Brexit. So thank you all for giving me a break. What will Brexit be for Ireland?